afternoon, welcome to my studio and to a Calvinian architecture. Today I'm reading from the 5th octave, 3rd chapter. The city is Eudossia, and I'll be reading chapter 2 and chapter 3. Chapter 2. It's the 21st of May 1997. I'm in Venice, travelling through Italy with my parents and my sister. Though I've been here many times before, this is the first time they've returned since we left in 1956. Yesterday we walked through the streets of Trieste together. On the footpath outside the house I was born in, my mother played hopscotch. And in the trattoria across the street, my father ordered bean soup and ate it at the same table he sat at when he celebrated my birth nearly 50 years ago. The four of us have visited many strange cities together. Each night I dream of a different city. During the day we eat like we've never eaten before. We all clean our plates thoroughly of the food we've partaken, and then we want to order more and yet more wine. Yesterday evening, on the occasion of my parents' 52nd wedding anniversary, we ate all kinds of shellfish. Later in my room, I tried to read my favourite story again, but I fell asleep as easily as I did when I was a child. This morning, I awake in the same position with the book lying open at page 97. I begin to read the story, and though I know it well, it seems strangely new, like a story I've never read before. Its title is Eudossia. Its images stay with me for many days. Last week on the train to Trieste, I insisted on reading it aloud to my parents and my sister. After I finished, we all looked out of the big windows onto the swiftly moving landscape. Beaches, hills, endless towns and houses. There seemed to be no horizon between the sea and the sky. No one spoke. Eventually, my father said, "By the way, what happened to that carpet? The one from Sydney?" "It's in storage," I answered. "Pity," he said, looking at my mother. "It's a good carpet." She opened her eyes wide and nodded vigorously. He then began to tell us the story of the carpet, how his friend Guido in Sydney had been in Australia for almost 40 years, and after all that time was about to return to Italy. Before he left, he gave the carpet to my parents, and they in turn passed it on to me. I've heard the story before, but something about the way my father tells it this time, the way he describes Guido's simple life in Sydney and his fierce desire to go back to die in his village, awakens a new interest in me about this carpet. "I didn't know Guido was sick," I said after he finished his story. "He's not," answers my father. "He's fine, but you never know." I resolved to make use of this carpet somehow. Later that year, on the 7th of September, we hear of Guido's death in Crotone. He dies in his own home. I decide to get the carpet out of storage. Finally, some weeks later, I unroll it. It's faded and worn. But instantly I get lost in the complexity of its designs. The more I gaze at it, the more I begin to decipher distinctly different paths, running both within the carpet's design and through its wear patterns, through the patches that are more threadbare than others. I wonder then what daily routines have defined these paths, what particular anxieties made feet either shuffle or press insistently against the pile. Can the conditions that generate a carpet owner's particular anxieties simultaneously shape the physiognomy of the city he might inhabit? I lay the carpet down in the centre of the living room. After a few months, I will notice that somehow the pattern of my movements through both the house and that particular room have been irrevocably altered. Irrevocably altered. Altered forever. Verse 3. There's yet another little island off the coast of Maine. It's called Placentia. I travel across jewelled water, spray flying clear through golden liquid air, ospreys and sea eagles follow me. All the way from South West Harbour, I cast anchor a little way away from the beach. The island's deserted dark green pines are greener still in the shadows. They cover it all the way down the beach. I approach on the tiny dinghy and leave the poor Richard anchored. After scrambling up the stony beach, I enter the forest. It's suddenly quiet in here. There's not a breath of wind, and the fragrance from the pines penetrates my nostrils. There's a path through it. Halfway down to my left, a huge pile of homewares sits rotting, mattresses, blankets, odds and ends, books, an old stove, assorted table legs. Further on in a little clearing, there's a tiny house. It's boarded up. A bee's nest above the door guards the entrance. A large swing for two sits suspended under the veranda. If you peer through the window, you can just make out a dark kitchen on the other side of the house. Then a withered rosebush climbs up the cedar wall. Leafless apricots and pear trees make up a ghostly orchard. Behind it stands the skeleton of an oak. This, then, is the story I overheard yesterday morning in the village bakery. An aeronautics engineer involved in the Manhattan Project discovers what the fruit of his labour consists of, what the end game of all the efforts about him really is. He immediately abandons everything. He abandons all he has: children, career, friends, possessions. Comes to live on this island with his wife, forgotten and forgetting the world. Lives here until he dies many, many years later. There is no water here, no electricity. Snow gets to 10 feet high in the winter. Some diaries were found in the kitchen cupboards only last year, listing weather patterns and snow drifts. One note said, from husband to wife, January 3, snow is 9 feet high. A lot of snow, but I love you more than all that snow. I walk around the house, hoping to find something, anything that will get me closer to them, but there's nothing. After he died, she refused to leave Placentia, rode every week to the mainland for supplies. I lie on a sandy dune outside the kitchen and look up at the clouds. All too soon it's time for me to go. The sky is darkening. I try and understand the depth of despair and bitterness, the desperation that would have allowed such a decision to be made and not reversed for a whole lifetime. The clearing somehow feels sacred. I walk back to the beach through the pine forest without turning back. I'm certain that if I do even glance back, I'll see something like a flickering movement. Perhaps through the orchard, a voice, maybe two voices, muffled laughter. I hear nothing though, except the silence. Outside, the pines, the world opens up again. The Atlantic is reeling itself in and out of the coast. I breathe again. The lowering sun warms my face. I wonder if that little house could be fixed up. I think about this all the way back to Mount Desert Island, across all that choppy water. People in boats moored in the harbour are laughing and joking. They're all glad to be back at the well-made dock. It's warm wood. These are people with places to go and things to do. I wonder if that little house could be fixed up. I heard in the bakery that they called it Placentia because they wanted to disappear within an eternal nurturing, it said. They wanted and needed to be fed by the earth and watered by the sea. I turned my head instinctively in the direction of the island. Nothing but the flat horizon. Placentia's gone. The spherical earth's turning again and again and again. And again. Until tomorrow.